I can tell you, listeners, the most common emotion I heard was not excitement. It was overwhelm.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Willsea, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday, I'll break down what actually matters, fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. On today's episode, everyone's watching their peers, copying their moves, and praying not to fall behind. And the result, strategy that feels more like imitation than intention. We're talking about what happens when institutional decisions are shaped more by peer pressure than purpose, and why the schools that wait for clarity may get left behind. And with me today is Carol Keese, VP for Communications and Chief Marketing Officer at the University of Oregon. She leads business-led strategies designed to shift perception and add value to the brand. And today she's here to help us unpack what it really takes to lead when the pressure to keep up is louder than the plan to move forward. Carol, welcome to the Pulse.
Thank you. It's fabulous to be here.
It is so good to have you here. Now, we were just before we hit record, we were talking about our travels because Carol and I have both been on some vacations recently, and it sounds like we've both been getting our steps in. So, Carol, what have you been up to?
Yeah, so we've been hiking the central part of Oregon. And for those of you who haven't come out here, Oregon is an amazing natural wonderland for those who like to hike and be outside. So we hiked an active volcano. I highly recommend that.
That's awesome.
7,000 feet, fly fishing on the Mackenzie, drift boat, Smith Rock, which is like the birthplace of American rock climbing. I didn't know there was a birthplace of rock climbing, but apparently there is one. It's amazing. It's just, we're having a fantastic time in an amazing state. And yeah, getting steps in.
So are you like refreshed after this vacation, or do you need a 90-minute massage?
Yeah, I would. Yes, I think the answer is yes to both of those questions. Yes. Yeah.
Well, we folks are going to get right into today's topic because it's a big one. And we're going to start with where the confidence isn't. According to new research from UPSIA and Education Dynamics, only 21% of institutions feel ahead of the curve when it comes to AI. The rest, nearly 80%, say they're either behind or just trying to keep pace. EDUCAUSE's latest AI policy study helps us explain why. Fewer than 4 in 10 institutions have formal policies in place around generative AI, and even fewer have defined what adoption actually looks like across departments. Higher ed has always had a bit of a reputation for lagging, and yes, for watching peers before making moves, but this moment, Carol, feels different to me. The tools are evolving really fast, which means the pressure is mounting, and decisions might be made in response to fear and not clarity. I'll say, after speaking at several conferences this summer and having had dozens of hallway conversations with enrollment and marketing leaders, I can tell you, listeners, the most common emotion I heard was not excitement. It was overwhelm. And that is not because people don't want to move, but the change and the pace of the change is just happening so fast. And so when you feel like you're already behind, that feeling just keeps compounding, I think, when you're reading the AI news headlines every single morning. So what happens when no one really knows what this, ahead means, and everyone's just afraid to maybe fall behind? I think that's where we are now, and that ambiguity is shaping decisions. So Carol, you've built brand strategy at Johns Hopkins, Children's National, across UVA, now at Oregon. You've led through everything from a brand reinvention to a reputation crisis and everything in the middle. So I think there's no one better here to unpack this than you, because you've seen how institutions respond under pressure. So when you hear these stats, only 21% feel ahead, et cetera, what's your take on that? And what should being ahead mean right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think that the 21% who feel that they're ahead, I'd like to know who they are, because if we look at the S curve of technology, that curve is not peaked yet. There is no ahead of. So, unless you're flinging yourself into the white space beyond the curve, like there is no curve. So I think it's also like, it's not the right target, right? The whole, like, we want to be ahead. We're not even sure where this is going yet and where it's landing. And I think that organizations can spend a lot of energy chasing, a very much still evolving, albeit really disruptive technology. I think the better angle is to really think about AI's potential for positive disruption and being smart and beginning to use it in everyday functions. It's great to chase the shiny, like the case study that was amazing, but like, okay, how are you using it every day across your portfolio in ways that help get your team not just comfortable with it, but proficient? You're not going to learn to ride if you think you're not on the bicycle. You have to get on it. So I think sometimes we forget that because we are under pressure. We feel pressure. We see one good case presentation or, our president's asking, what are we doing on this? And I think, I would kind of encourage us to put it in the fundamentals first before we start thinking about how shiny it is or how it might be a year from now. The other thing is I see everyone kind of falling into this trap a little bit of thinking about AI as one thing, right? It's far more like the calculator, like the internet than the calculator, but it's more than that. Like, it's more disruptive than the internet even was because of its generative power. But I also think like it's so many things together that when we talk about AI model in this sort of monolithic way, I think we kind of can suffer from some paralysis, like, how are we doing on this? When in fact, it's really what's the potential for this disruptive technology to inform and change and evolve the business functions that we already lead? And that's a different kind of conversation. So I'd like to see more conversation about that than the last like really crazy, amazing thing that you saw that you now feel like you need to replicate.
Right. It's less shiny object syndrome and more like infrastructure shift. And I think that's why I like your comparison to the internet so much. Mm-hmm. So whether or not there should be an ahead, I think institutions are making decisions like there is. And there is this tension that you have to move fast and be first. So like, is the goal to be first or is it to be smart?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say the answer to that is always to be smart, but especially for higher ed. That doesn't mean that we don't need to move faster, right? So I don't think it's like, we can just sort of wait and see. Like, we can't afford to do that. Business cycles, forget AI for a second, just business cycles have become much faster. And we, as a whole industry, have had to step up the speed with which we respond to market demand, reputational issues, all of those things. So yes, we need to move faster. But we need to be smart in doing that. We, as a sector, don't have the deep pockets to really understand or add to or significantly change or augment how AI can be used and will be used, right? We can't be the guinea pigs or the first use case, but we can learn a lot from those who are able to do that. And that includes leading, ad agencies, reputational agencies, PR agencies, AI providers themselves with the huge deep pockets are themselves continually evolving where this is going, new AI-driven products, all of that. There's that, I don't even know what year it was, Mallory, the old Lending Tree ad, when banks compete, you win, right? Do you remember that? So I think we're seeing some of that. This is an arms race. We will benefit from that arms race. We can't sit and wait. We have to move faster, but we also have to understand that we will be the beneficiaries of much more sophisticated and deep-pocketed providers in the space. And we will need to watch how they're using it. We also need to watch how consumer brands are using it because they're often ahead of us. So I think if we're not watching those out-of-industry exemplars, we are making a mistake on that one.
I want to circle back to your lens of outside in a little bit later in our conversation because I know that this is really important to you and I know that it is something you're going to be bringing to an upcoming event in our industry very soon. So let's talk about higher ed's copycat culture. Right. We know that exists, and to some degree that's fine. The difference between being copycats and smart benchmarking, right? Those are two different things. But I think right now, a lot of schools are watching what the flagship down the road is doing and just following suit. And hey, you happen to be the flagship down the road. So from a leadership perspective, like how are you making decisions that are informed, that, taking your own advice, looking at what those market leaders in other industries are doing, but making sure that it's wrapped around alignment with Oregon's values and goals?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, the great adage of, the imitation is the highest form of flattery. I think one of the great things about our industry is that we are very supportive of one another, and we share information freely. We applaud everyone else's good use of this thing or excellent case study. So I want to make sure that we, in this moment, particularly lean into that rather than the other direction. In terms of the use of AI in higher education, I think it goes back to it's not one thing. So you asked about values and sort of mission and purpose and how those things are being applied. I think that applies most closely in the use of AI core to our mission. So how is it being used in teaching? How is it being used in the classroom? How is it being used by students? How should it be used? What about research? All of these things that really get at where is our core business and how are we thinking about the effects of AI and the appropriate use, the ethical use of AI as a tool in the academy. That I think needs a lot of mission and values discussion with faculty, and that's one thing. But the other thing is, so we talk about the school's goals. When we think about the business functions that we're responsible for, particularly those of us in communications and marketing, we have ambitious goals, and we have necessary goals right now, particularly when many of us are looking at downward financial pressures from many sources, right? So if we're going to attract students and if we're going to develop and promote a compelling brand position, we need to understand the day-to-day use of AI as a tool across our portfolios in creative and issues management and reputation perception, understanding targeting of specific audiences, not just students. I'm not the U of O responsible for student enrollment, but it's of course where a lot of AI use right now. Conversation is really going there too. So I think again the higher level, how does higher education and the academy incorporate and metabolize this really disruptive technology is also different than how are the business goals of our institutions being supported through the disciplines that we lead. And that's a day-to-day business ops kind of conversation. It's much less elevated, but it's absolutely necessary.
So to your point, AI is not one thing, and it touches everything from the classroom to the chatbot that is talking to the prospective student. So when AI is touching every single space of the institution, who actually decides what matters? Do you have a chief AI officer in that role? Is it the president? Is it the cabinet? Something else entirely?
I think when you talk about what matters, you're back to the ethical use question, and that's a policy question. And that's often faculty senate in consultation with the president and cabinet. So I'm plugged into those conversations, but we're also making a distinction between sort of the emerging policy and best practice, which frankly the whole industry is also trying to develop at the same time as our other industries, and how we can use AI thoughtfully as a tool today to get the business of the business done. And I think some of that is more complex than others, right? So when we talk about use of privacy and data at the nexus of AI, that requires more conversation than, for instance, how we might be using AI to resize ads, right, in an ad campaign, or how we're using AI to better understand perceptions of our brands in a day-to-day like that. So there's a spectrum, I think, of ethical engagement, faculty engagement, leadership engagement on these policy issues, and the day-to-day practice of the business where it's a tool.
Carol, we've been talking now about this idea that fast is better. Actually, I'll say I know companies that that's their motto. Fast is better, right? And there is a lot of companies out there in our space, out of our space, that say that they are AI at their core. Some are, some aren't. You look under the hood, you're going to see a whole lot of things. So the companies are chasing the hype. Private equity is chasing the hype. Institutions are chasing the hype, right? So where does strategy actually come into all of this? And how, as a leader, would you guide your team to be intentional in this moment?
Yeah, I think unless you're in technology or search as a business, I think that we all should take a breath and remember that the fundamentals still matter, right? And this was true when the World Wide Web showed up on the scene. Like it still matters that we understand and get our message to the right audience in the right format and in the right language at the right place, right? It still matters that we have brands that are strong and differentiated and compelling, right? Ensuring that your content, whether that's a speech by your president or the content on your application page, is findable and compelling, matters. Whether that was way back when it was a view book or whether it was by SEO, whether it's now by GEO, that all matters. So how we go about the fundamentals might shift. But again, kind of chasing the shiny object versus remembering what we're in the business to do, I think is a really important distinction. I think it's also worth noting that there was a recent Gartner study, I think it was last month, that estimated that organizations whose main business was not technology would still take about 18 to 24 months to fully incorporate agentic AI into their business cycle processes. That's what I'm talking about. Like, how is your creative team playing in the space? How's your issues management team thinking about using AI, or frankly, getting into the business of just using it, get on the bicycle, right? How are we thinking about how our teams across our portfolios are leaning into this tool in different ways, and just recognize it's going to take a while for both the tool and the adoption to mature and to be a native part of our business cycles, not just for us as a lagging kind of tend to be lagging industry, but for like your regular Fortune 500 companies. We're all in the same process.
Your perspective on all of this is so valuable, Carol. I appreciate the level head that you bring to it, right? You're not chasing the hype. You're like, I have seen the other things similar to this, and maybe this is moving a little faster, but keeping that level head, I think, is so important. And actually, I want to drill into like what's happening in your team, in your unit at Oregon, like when it comes to AI strategy and experimentation, like what are you up to these days?
Yeah. So we're hardwiring. I'm glad you asked that question because we just submitted our annual plan for this fiscal year. So we just provided to the president 2 weeks ago. This is what we're committing to doing, right? And we use OKRs through our organization to line up all of our strategies. And one of ours is all around the use of technology. And one specific one is to adopt AI in at least 3 areas: content creation, audience analysis, workflow automation, right? So again, maybe not the sexiest thing. Like this may not be an AMA presentation next year about how we like crush it and like awe the world. And I mean, I hope that would be cool. But first, before we do that, I want to make sure that we walk before we run, and we actually embed it thoughtfully in workflow automation and how we think about content creation and how we understand reputation, at least those 3 this year, like meaningfully. So I think if we can do that, we will cut our chops a little bit or cut our teeth, whatever, to be able to do things that may be bolder or maybe more purely inventive, right? But I really think we need to kind of get the fundamentals down with how does AI help us in these business fundamentals. Yeah.
Look, the things you just mentioned are all very measurable. And like, spoiler, I'm going to be chatting with a friend of ours in just a week or 2 here. And we're going to be digging into on the podcast, like the difference between being efficient and being effective, and why we need to be measuring a lot of this stuff. Now, I'll save that conversation for that future Monday. But so much of the AI conversation the last couple of years has really been stuck in faster admission emails and chatbots.
Yeah.
But,
right.
but building trust with your audience and figuring out better workflows. And these are the things that do help us move towards being more effective.
Absolutely. And I think on that last point, to what you just said, like we're seeing a lot of stuff out there on AI for enrollment, which is absolutely appropriate. As someone who is not responsible for that, I'm really interested in how an AI's potential to better understand consumer sentiment, brand reputation in real time. I think I haven't heard as much about that, but I think that it is enormous because, of course, that has an indirect but profound effect on potential students' interest in enrolling in your organization. It's just not the direct conversation about enrolling, right? I think aligning brand voice with the needs and expectations of multiple audiences. All of us talk to multiples, right? Whether it's a legislative audience, very specific set of needs, or it's a parent audience, or it's the general public, or it's our alumni base. I mean, it's a constant change, right? So I think using AI to message test will become increasingly important in general, but also when the stakes are particularly high, whether that's during a crisis or a particularly complex moment, to sort of be able to message test to ensure not that you're not for spin, but to ensure that the message you're intending is actually going to land the way you intend it with specific audiences. And a lot of that's embedded in the literal words that we use. Being able to use synthetic audiences or other kinds of models that AI enables us to use to say, oh, well, we thought we were saying something, but it turns out if we run this through the model, people would take a very different interpretation of this message. And so I think that's, from a communication strategy perspective, super important to be a tool that can help you model that before you release something. Wow, that's amazing. I'm not hearing as much about that, but I think that has profound implications for the way brands can be managed now in real time in ways that are really responsive and thoughtful to their audiences.
I think you're hearing more about that because it takes a more sophisticated implementation to get to that point, right? Like we can all just slap a tool into our workflow that's going to help us like respond to an email a little bit quicker. Like that just, you know, the like turnaround time on that is a lot shorter. And so, and really we've only been living in this AI world for a few years now. So of course, all the examples coming out are the ones with the short turnarounds. But what you're talking about is the meaningful stuff that I really feel like we're at that like edge of the cliff where we're going to be jumping into the situations you're describing soon, I think. Yeah.
I hope so. And that's one, particularly brand reputation, where we can look to Fortune 500 companies who not only have the means to invest in some of these models, but are working with agencies to kind of cut everybody's teeth, right? So they can be the guinea pigs and we can learn a lot from that. I'm planning to. I certainly can't, our organization can't support the development of a whole new model, but I do think a year from now, we'll be able to learn a lot.
So looking at those Fortune 500 companies, looking outside in, let's talk AMA for a moment because we are two of the three newbies on the planning committee this year. We got to spend a little time together earlier this summer in Chicago. It was a blast. And I think, we're both pretty tapped into the industry. So we're hearing from people all over the country about what's really top of mind for them related to AI, not AI, just the real concerns and challenges that are taking place on campuses right now. So what are some of those themes? It doesn't have to be AI focused, but what are some of those themes that you're hearing the most from the peers? And what are you bringing that's a little bit different to the AMA planning committee this year?
It's a little bit different. Okay, so what are the themes? I think there's the complexity of the environment that we're working in. I think the number of externalities that have been kind of added to the already complex world of higher education in the last year, whether we're talking about the effect of geopolitics on higher education, the effect of federal shifts in behavior and action related to higher education. We are still seeing that demographic softening that we used to freak out about 5 years ago. It seems to have been in the sort of rearview mirror now, but it's still very real and still very much on the horizon for many of us. So I think those of us, my colleagues, people like you, people like everyone who is on the AMA, are really leading their organizations through a period of change that is very fast and very complicated at the same time. So when I think about it, didn't end up being kind of a consolation session. It was a fantastic meeting. I think the AMA coming up is going to be a really timely and really, frankly, exciting opportunity for people to see like good work happens. And this good work is stuff that we need now more than ever. But I do think that it does underscore like how we're going to need to think differently in some areas and how tools like AI can help expedite our thinking and kind of leapfrog maybe one or two iterations of this stuff, again, by looking to out of industry, by adopting thoughtful in industry examples. We can, again, as a super highly supportive community of practice, help each other get through and evolve in a period of just great complexity. I'm excited. I mean, I'm for the next 5 years, I wish I could sort of jump forward and look back and see where we will be, because I think the emergence of a lot of young talent now with a lot of senior guidance and experience coupled with some really interesting evolution in technology really bodes well for our ability to evolve.
I can't agree more. I think especially on that note around young talent, if you are within your first few years of your career, like there is a moment for you right now that you can grasp that like doesn't come up all the time. But if you are hungry and you are willing to learn and learn quickly about all of this artificial intelligence stuff, stuff in air quotes, I think there's a real moment for. And while there is still so much in the media about entry-level jobs going away, and I mean, I just did an episode with Dave Wheel on this from Ithaca too, but like, so that is real, but if you can learn these tools and get in early, like there's so much opportunity to seize. A long way of saying, come join me and Carol at the AMA this year. I think by the time, Carol, this episode drops, because of course we're recording it a little in advance, but I think by the time this drops, that schedule will have been published. So I think the call to action at the end of this one is, folks, go check out that schedule.
Check it out.
We know it's really good. So we can't wait to share it with you all too.
It's going to be fabulous.
It really is. All right. Well, Carol, any parting thoughts before we wrap this one up?
I mean, I just think on your last point, never waste a good crisis is something that we say a lot in this business. But, we can think about AI as being a positive disruptive crisis. Like, don't waste this moment. Use the rocket fuel here to propel our collective thinking about what's possible for higher education, rather than thinking about this as like a chore, another thing that we have to do, or a pressure point that we have to keep up with. I think, that could be really limiting. I'd love to see us just imagine what's possible.
It's time to floor it as we're driving through the fog, not park on the side of the road. All right. Well, Carol, it was such a pleasure having you on today, folks. Please head to Apple, head to Spotify, wherever you get this podcast. Subscribe. It is the best way to make sure that we stay in your earbuds a couple times a week. And hey, if you're feeling generous, please come and give us a 5-star rating. We'd love to hear your review. Thanks, everyone, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.